afternoon and good evening to everyone zooming in from across the country to join the National Association of Latino Healthcare Executives and our kickoff event launching the Mindful Leader Series, executive fireside chats with mental health and wellness experts. So as many of you know, or if some of you are just getting to meet me today, my name is Rolando Gomez. I am the Executive Director of NALHE, past chair, and it gives me just great pleasure to welcome you to this kickoff event. We have the honor of hosting Robert Matheny this evening. We thank you, Robert, for your time and insight. Today, we are going to have honest conversation, and we will learn more about self-care and wellness and practices for the mindful leader. So if you are new to the NALHE family, what I'd like to do is take a couple of minutes just to share with you some highlights of our professional association. So you can see on this slide, our mission is to promote health equity for Latino communities by increasing Latino and Latina representation within healthcare systems, and also by supporting policy, legislation, and regulation that seeks to improve health and healthcare for diverse communities. Our vision really does set the runway for our future, and that is to be the professional association of choice that transforms the Latino and Latina experience in the national healthcare leadership space. So we champion diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and we advance various perspectives and ideas. We also just strive to work diligently to bring to you, our members and partners, resources, various programming, and events, as you can see on this slide here. Now, this provides you the opportunity to connect and share best practices. So we welcome you to learn more about NALHE and hopefully join our family if you haven't yet. So visit our website at www.nalhe.org. So to set the stage for tonight's event is my good friend and colleague, Isabel Pacheco. But before I introduce her, I'd like to ask that you please utilize the comment box or the chat box there to submit questions, and that you also remain on the mute format there, as well as if you're on video, that's okay. But for questions, please submit those through the comment box, and I will be monitoring that for our activity later tonight. So Isabel Pacheco is Chief of Staff for the Interoperability Institute and a NALHE board member and chair of the Leadership Incubator Committee. So welcome, Isabel. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Rolando. And I am super excited about tonight. I feel like this topic is very timely, and judging on the interest that we've had from our audience seems very timely. So I'm really excited to get started tonight. We can advance to the next slide. So for tonight, I wanted to just set the stage here on what self-reflection is before we get into the meat of our discussion tonight. So some self-reflection questions I'll present you with prior to us getting into the presentation. I just wanted to say, you know, what are self-reflection questions? So, and why ask them? Go back one row. You went too fast for me. So self-reflection questions are just questions that help prompt you. They help you reflect. It's a lot like journaling prompts if you've been in school or if you do any kind of journaling. They help you tap into your thoughts and emotions and help identify your strengths and weaknesses, what your core beliefs and values are, so that you can just get to know yourself better. Next slide. So self-reflection questions can be about any area of your life. They can be through emotional, physical, and mental health and well-being, personal growth, what your life purpose and vision is, definitely relationships, home life and environment, career and work, which is going to be the better part of our topic tonight, even finances and spending habits, what your daily habits and activities look like, hobbies, interests, and even spiritual beliefs. Next slide. So here I'm just prompting you to, with a few self-reflection prompts for you tonight to just reflect on as you're listening to our topic tonight, and Robert speaking on the various topics on mental health and well-being. So think about, how much time this week or this month have you spent caring for yourself? What are your favorite self-care activities and why do you enjoy them? How you can bring more self-care into your day, how you can improve your health and well-being this week, this month, this year, and recognizing if your stress level too high. Ask yourself, is my stress level too high? And what are the things that you can do regularly to reduce stress? And what stops you from doing those things? So just giving you a couple of prompts to just jog into your mind as you're listening tonight, and we go into the chat section later this evening, and hopefully you will have lots of questions for us. So just reminding you, put your questions in the chat, and we will get to as many as we possibly can tonight. And before I introduce Robert, I wanted to just say this year in March, hopefully some of you on the line tonight have had the opportunity to participate in the ACAC's Congress on Healthcare Leadership. And in Congress this year, there was a fireside chat with Dr. Anthony Fauci. And in that fireside chat, there were some key takeaways that were asked to him. How does he practice self-care? How does he keep himself sane throughout all the craziness that's been going on throughout this pandemic? And it was interesting because he said, he practices self-care regularly. He doesn't neglect himself in that way. He exercises regularly. As a matter of fact, he runs about 3 to 4 miles every day. He reads often. He reads at least 3 biographical, historical, or mystery novels every month. And he encouraged us to find a mentor, no matter where you are in your professional career. Having a mentor to bounce ideas and have frank conversations with was something that he highly recommended. So just to remind you all, even the best of us need to practice self-care and relate with a mentor. So without further ado, I will introduce Robert. So Robert is a coach and a consultant with expertise in human relationships, organizational leadership, organizational culture, change management, and team dynamics. During the COVID pandemic, he's played a critical role in the Henry Ford Hospital System's hospital incident command response and strategic advancement about the psychological well-being of the frontline workforce. He styles himself as a pracademic with an interest in conducting translational and interventional that addresses current real-world problems. Robert holds a master's in clinical counseling and is a fellow of the Urban and Ethnic Leadership at the Aero Leadership Institute, and is currently in the process of completing his PhD program. As an interpersonal and intergroup communication scholar, his research has focused on the intersections between ideological, relationship, and professional conflict. So Robert, I will hand it off to you, and thank you so much for moderating tonight for us.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you, Rolando. It's an honor to be with you all. This is a topic, as I shared with Isabel and Rolando, that is near and dear to my heart. And as a result, I had trouble narrowing down what specifically I wanted to share with you all this evening. So I probably have way more here than we have time to go through. So if you do have, I'm going to move quickly, but if you do have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat line. And Rolando, if there's a need to just kind of take a pause and drill down on something based on a question or a comment that's coming up, don't hesitate to interrupt me. We can do that. So topic of the evening is on the mindful leader, and I didn't put a slide in on this, but as I was thinking just a few minutes ago about this talk, it occurred to me that it's helpful to define what we mean by mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that we use a lot as a term in pop culture, and it means so many things these days that it's come to mean almost nothing at all, because it encompasses a variety of practices, not all of them what I consider mindfulness. So when I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about intentional, non-judgmental attention to the present moment and the unfolding experience. And I'll break that down briefly. Intentional, meaning you can't be accidentally mindful. Sometimes we get into activities that we really enjoy, and we can get into a flow state where we kind of lose track of time. We don't remember, exactly. Sometimes we'll do this on a commute. We don't remember how we got from A to B. We were just sort of in this flow state. That is a relaxing state, but it's not a mindful state. Mindfulness is about intentionality. It's about paying attention to the moment, to what's happening in the now, to being able to notice what is in the now and what also is not in the now, so that we can be aware of our thoughts, our feelings, the judgments that we're making about our experience, and try to step back and diffuse from that in a non-judgmental way, and get really clear on our values, and what we would be doing if we were really living into our values, so that we can then come back to that present moment with a sense of intentionality. So if we can go to the next slide. I was doing some research earlier this year as I was talking about this topic with some of our leaders at Henry Ford, and I found this study that was conducted in 2020 on the effect of the pandemic on the stress in healthcare workers. And this was a meta-analysis of several different studies. I can't remember specifically how many, but what they found is across the nation, and across a variety of job types in healthcare, 1 in 4 folks reported experiencing clinically significant levels of anxiety, 1 in 5 of depression, and almost a third of insomnia. The next slide there. Not only that, but what we found out was that the way that we think about stress actually has an impact on the effect that stress has on us. So just almost 34% of folks said that they believe that stress has a negative impact on their health. And of those folks, what we found out is if you believe that stress is going to have a negative impact on your health, then you are at a 43% increased risk of mortality. So just the fact that you believe that stress is harmful makes it more harmful for you. If you believe, however, that stress is something that is an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for development, an opportunity to shake things up, that risk of mortality, that increase that risk of mortality isn't there. When we're looking at the specific stress of healthcare workers, if we can look at that next slide, we know that there's a difference between the stress of our frontline healthcare workers, those who are involved in care delivery, and those who are on the executive or administrative roles. But that stress is still very, very real. What I have found, though, is that our administrative leaders struggle with validating the stress that they're experiencing, because they're looking at the folks who are in the ICUs, in the EDs, doing direct patient care, and they're saying to themselves oftentimes, I'm not doing that, so therefore my stress isn't what their stress is. Their stress is valid and mine is not. And what we're finding is that is absolutely not true. The stress that our administrative, our executive folks are going through is complex. It is intense. It's caused by a variety of things, as you can see here. Challenges about managing at least partial remote workforce, about meeting the regulatory requirements of reporting out on COVID-19 statistics, all of the change saturation, the exceeding pace of change, having to figure out how to stand up new care delivery pathways, increased stakes in decision-making, feeling the weight of what I'm doing and that my decision is having a direct impact on our patients, on our care delivery folks, and then being able to manage the resources, the financial resource, the human resources, and do all that well. All of that is weighing very, very, very heavy on our administrative staff. So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience. We can go to the next slide there. So for me, March 16th of 2020 is a day that will forever be burned into my memory, because that was the day that we opened up incident command in Henry Ford Health System. I got word on the Sunday of that week that we were doing that. And I sent a text message to my hospital president. And I said, is there anything that I can do to help? And I got a text back immediately said, can you be here tomorrow morning? And I arrived and I said, what can I do? And she said, please just go round. Folks are very nervous. And so I started rounding, started talking to folks, asking questions like, what's weighing on you? What's top of mind? What do you need that we haven't thought of? And we started seeing patients trickle in to our ED a few days after that. And I can remember very distinctly, I stopped by our ED to check in with the leaders down there in the morning, and about one to every 7 patients that were coming into the ED were COVID suspected patients. That was in the morning. By the afternoon, that ratio had flipped exactly, and it was 7 to 1. And it was like a deluge from there on out. And I began a regular rhythm every day of rounding in as many units as I possibly can, listening to folks, gathering themes, and reporting back to incident command. What were the themes that I was hearing? What were the needs that were bubbling up? And also dispelling rumors, and making sure just that the lines of communication were staying as open as possible. And this was a challenge for us. Let me give you some fast facts about Henry Ford if you're not familiar with us. Let's go to that next slide. We're a rather large health system in Southeast Michigan. We've got just over 34,000 employees, 45 if you count our contractors. 6 inpatient hospitals, a few more inpatient behavioral health hospitals. We also own our own payer service. We have community health, population health, and we've got a variety of partnerships and research projects happening at any given time. We are a complex healthcare system, and so we were not set up though to manage a global pandemic, as I think lots of health systems can identify with. We had to open up incident command at individual hospitals, here and there for very localized emergencies. But this was the first time since 9/11 that we'd had a system-wide incident command. And even then, on that day, incident command was open for a few hours, not for a sustained emergency like a pandemic. And so we quickly began realizing that we were going to have to do some things to not just deal with an emergent issue, but to deal with what was going to be a very protracted and intractable issue in our society. So we realized that we're going to have to take care of not just our patients, but also our employees. If we can jump to that next slide. So we gathered a group of folks. It was a partnership with our EAP, with myself, with some of our behavioral health folks. We put ad hoc teams together, a team that still exists now. We called it our Recover and Heal team. We started delivering psychological first aid services. I started rounding in every unit, meeting with teams, giving them the language and the knowledge to be able to identify the symptoms of traumatic stress in themselves and in each other. We conducted wellness rounds. I led a weekly call called Conversations with Leaders, where we were doing just-in-time coaching, addressing their concerns and giving them insights and how they can best support their team members. We scheduled for particularly hard days. We would bring in critical incident stress debriefing teams to debrief teams. And then over the long term, we scheduled peer processing groups just for them to be able to share kind of what they were going through and validate their experiences. We created a care cart, we called it. It was just really walking around with things like popcorn and water, and because what we found out is over a time, people were so in the weeds that they didn't want to talk about what they were going through, but just simply handing them a bottle a snack, reminding them to take a moment, expressed a certain level of care and support that maybe a "hey, how you doing" wasn't going to be able to do that day. We put together what we called our Stronger Together buddy program, where we matched people with other folks to just check in with each other and say, how are you doing? And then we started ramping up our acceptance and commitment training, which is a psychological therapy that gives people real-time, in the moment coping skills that they can do to change their relationship to their stress. But I can remember very clearly, there was a day I got a call. It was after our first wave. We had gone through wave one. And once that wave had dissipated, we had started to turn to all of our strategic projects that we didn't get to work on during the COVID wave, trying to get caught up. And then we found ourselves going into a second wave. And as we were going into that second wave, I got a call from the leader of our emergency department. She said, can you meet with my team? They just are not doing well. They're not coping. And we have to go lean into the second wave, and I'm not sure what they're going to do. And as I was driving to the hospital thinking about what am I going to say to these poor folks, the only thing I could come up with is there's nothing that I can do to make this better. And that's not a very inspirational statement. But I gathered with them in one of our rooms, and I said, all right, guys, here's the deal. I can't make this better for you. We are asking too much of you. We're going to continue to ask too much of you as an organization because we've got to show up for our community. So the only thing I can do, since I can't make the situation better for you, the only thing I can do is help you change the way that you're relating to this situation, change the way that you're caring for yourself, and then commit to you that we as an organization are going to be constantly looking for ways that we can alleviate the pressure that's on you. We are searching every day for ways that we can do that. And that really led us to this conversation of really matching both institutional resources and institutional priorities about how do we manage stress for our folks, as well as teaching folks self-care. So let's talk about what you can do. We know that you've probably been focused on caring for your teams as administrators, as executives. You've been focused on everybody else, but what can you do for yourself? If we can go forward 2 slides, actually. The first thing I want to recommend to you is to start with a shift in your mindset. And I want you to think about your life, yourself as a castle. Your life is a castle, and think about yourself as the lord of your castle. As the lord of your castle, that means that you have control over your drawbridge. And the drawbridge is the instrument that determines when people have access to the interior of the castle. Who gets to have access? How long do they get to stay? And what resources are coming and going out of that castle. And what I find, and Isabel and Rolando and I were talking about this just before everyone else joined the call, as healthcare executives, as administrators, we are such like service-oriented folks, servant leaders. And what we do in the name of mission, in the name of purpose, in the name of caring for our teams and our frontline folks, we often put down our drawbridge and we leave it down. We feel a responsibility to give folks access to us at all times. I went during our first wave, I think I went almost 10 months, or 10 weeks, not months, good Lord, 10 weeks without a single day off. I worked 7 days a week, 10 to 14-hour days each week. My partner went even further. He's a leader in our health system as well. And I started noticing, but for both of us, our functioning was really beginning to drop because even when we were home, our email was going like crazy. Our phone was going like crazy. I would get text messages and phone calls as late as sometimes midnight, 1 a.m., dealing with things on a regular basis. And here's the deal. We do this in the name of purpose, in the name of service. But when you put your drawbridge down and you leave it down, you become public property. And when you become public property, what often begins to happen is the folks that you serve, the folks that you've been making yourself available to with all of that time, and you've done it out of love, you now are at the risk of starting to resent them. You begin to resent the job. You begin to resent the mission. When we give up control of our drawbridge, when we give up control of our boundaries, and we become public property, we end up overusing our resources. And we have less and less to give. In the name of being available, in the name of showing up, we show up empty-handed with nothing to offer. And what I've learned over time is that our people, they benefit as much from our creative absence as they do from our creative presence. Because it's what we do when we get to withdraw, when we get to pull the drawbridge up and say, no more today. I need to rest. I need to recoup. It's what we do in those moments that gives us the energy, the resources, the interior integrity to show up and offer life and hope and wisdom and guidance and in innovative thinking to the people that we serve. Being able to withdraw and take care of ourselves is one of the most selfless things that you can do, because without being able to do that, you've got nothing to offer your teams. But that's hard to do. If we can go to the next slide. One of the reasons that that's hard to do, actually, let's skip this. I'll come back to this idea. Let's go to the next slide after this, and I'll come back to this idea. Back one, sorry, dictator within, there you go. One of the reasons it's hard to do is because of the ways our brain works. Stephen Hayes is an author of a book, great book, called The Liberated Mind. And I saw someone, it looked like somebody was asking for a resource on acceptance and commitment training. His book, The Liberated Mind, is a great place to start. He talks about the dictator within. There is a part of our mind that knows what's good for us, knows that we can't work 7 days a week, 10 hours, 14 hours a day. But there's a part of our mind that when we feel discomfort, when we encounter a problem, our mind immediately goes to solutioning. I've got to get rid of that discomfort. I've got to get rid of that pain. I've got to figure out this problem. I've got to fix the issue. And that Stephen Hayes calls that the dictator within, because we have this impulse of, I've got to just fix it. I've got to get rid of this. I've got to move away from this. And when we do that, oftentimes the things that we do aren't in accordance with our values. For instance, we know self-care is important, but we see such a need around us. We feel the pressures of our institutions' needs. And so we work. That is the dictator within, experiencing the guilt, experiencing the pressure, and saying, the way that I'm going to handle the guilt, the way that I'm going to handle the pressure is to work harder. And that gets me away from the discomfort of I'm not doing enough. And then tomorrow I'll show up and I'll keep doing that. I'll work even harder and I'll work even harder. But in the long run, it's draining me. It's killing me. It's not in accordance with my values. And it's not the kind of leadership I would want to model. Go to the next slide. So I want to introduce to you the ideas of cognitive fusion versus cognitive diffusion. When we are getting fused with our thoughts, cognitive fusion is essentially this idea of, I've got this thought. If you've ever had a thought that you just can't get rid of, a feeling that you're just obsessing over, it's the only thing in front of your face that you can see. It's like it's your entire lens, and you are fused with it. You begin to think of your thoughts as your actual reality. Everything that we do, everything that we experience is a function of our thinking. But the problem is that because of the dictator within and these other things, not everything that we think and feel is true. Just because I think and feel it doesn't mean I should take it literally. I want to take it seriously, but I don't want to take it literally. But I need to be able to step back and say, is that impulse that I'm experiencing, is that belief that I'm encountering, is that true? Is it in accordance with my values or not? But I can't step back and do that if I'm hooked by it, if it's all that I can see. So diffusion is being able to see your thoughts as they actually are, as an ongoing attempt to make meaning and then choosing to give only the thoughts that are in alignment with your values, give them action, give them power. And you know this because you've experienced this. If you've ever had a thought that's popped into your brain and you're like, where in the world did that thought come from? That's not like me. I would never act on that thought. That's you stepping back and being able to be aware of not only the thought that you're having, but that there's a part of you that's doing the thinking. And this is what mindfulness allows us to do. Mindfulness allows us to have what we call meta awareness. It's the idea that I have thoughts and feelings, but I am not my thoughts and feelings. There's a part of me that has a thought or that is a thought, and then there's a part of me that's doing the thinking. An analogy that Stephen Hayes gives us is if clouds in the sky are like thoughts, then the sky itself is you. You have clouds, you have thoughts, but you're not those clouds. You're the sky that contains those. So diffusion involves us just being able to step back and notice and pay attention to our thoughts, notice that we're thinking, but not necessarily taking those thoughts literally. Go on to the next slide there. Being able to do this helps us develop something that we call psychological flexibility. That's the ability to think with openness and to pay attention with non-judgmental awareness of our thoughts, of our feelings, what am I experiencing, and being able to be really clear about our values, and then say, I might be having an anxious thought today. I might be having some sort of discomfort, and I may not be able to get rid of that thought. I may not be able to solve that problem, but I'm going to allow that discomfort to just be there and still choose to enact my values. An example that I experience in my own life a lot is the idea of imposter syndrome. I'm working on my PhD, my dissertation, and if you've ever been in academics, you know that imposter syndrome is a real thing. I think it's also true in healthcare executive leadership as well. Imposter syndrome, the idea of, am I really good enough for all this? And if I was ever to be found out, if people found out that I'm not as good as I say that I am, then they certainly wouldn't allow me to be here. And when I experience imposter syndrome, the last thing I want to do is pull out my dissertation and work on that. What I do when I experience that and I don't want to work on my dissertation, I am able to justify not working on my dissertation because I'll think, oh man, there's so much work I need to do that I don't have time to be doing my research. There's stuff at home I need to focus on, don't have time to do my research. And I find all kinds of justifiable ways to procrastinate so that I don't have to engage with that imposter syndrome that I'm experiencing. And the thing is that we do that because it works. It's functional. For the day that I do that, it helps me not experience that discomfort of that imposter syndrome. But tomorrow, when I wake up, that imposter syndrome is going to return. In fact, it's probably going to be even more intense because I hadn't made any progress today. And so what I did to get away from the thought, to get away from it today, actually is increasing it tomorrow. We get this awful feedback loop. Psychological flexibility is that skill of being able to step back, diffuse from that, and say, what would I be doing today if I was living according to my values? I may experience the discomfort of that imposter syndrome. I'm going to hold that compassionately, and yet I'm still going to choose to live into my values. It empowers us to accept our pain, to turn toward our discomfort, and choose our values alongside of that. And the kicker is that when we do that, we gain more control, we are more self-efficacious, and the things that are causing us discomfort over time, we are able to address without having to just stuff it away. So go on to the next slide. Part of the challenge I find as I've been teaching folks the skills of psychological flexibility and living into our values and using mindfulness to do that, is we bump up against 3 limiting beliefs. And this is true of self-care too. 3 most common limiting beliefs I think that folks bump into. The first one, there isn't enough of insert in the blank. There isn't enough time. There isn't enough people on my team to spread the work around, to delegate to. There isn't enough financial resources. There isn't enough whatever it is. And so therefore, I can't do what you're saying. I can't I can't practice mindfulness. I can't do this diffusion. I can't take time off. Second one, I'm not enough of whatever it is. I don't have enough skill set. I'm not a good enough leader. I'm not, mindful, whatever it may be. And the last one is the one that's the most insidious. And it is, yeah, I hear what you're saying. That's great. But my situation is different because, and that's why everything that you're saying has no value or relevance to me. And when we encounter these three limiting beliefs, we use these as sort of ways to sort of self-sabotage and not live into our values, and we get caught in that feedback loop. So I'm going to give you one quick tool that you can use in a practical level with a challenge, and it's a quick grounding technique. And then we're gonna practice it together, and then I'm gonna stop talking didactically and take some questions. So we can go on to that next slide. This is just one skill for being able to diffuse, being able to step back and then get clear on your values. So what is grounding? Grounding is a set of simple strategies that can help you for the moment just sort of detach, diffuse from emotional pain. It's a way of being able to distract yourself, especially in moments that are intense, maybe an anxiety attack, maybe just when the stress is super high, when anger is being triggered, whatever it is, and being able to practice healthy, non-judgmental detachment. Next one. It's not about problem solving. Grounding isn't about you being able to, here's how I'm going to fix this problem. By being able to create some emotional space for yourself through a grounding technique to detach, it prevents those difficult emotions from becoming so overwhelming that now the dictator within takes in, and you choose a behavior that often makes things worse. Next slide. And so it anchors you, and it allows you, because you've been able to ground yourself, to eventually come back to that problem with that clarity around your values and act from a wise-minded space. So I'm going to give you one quick grounding technique that you can use, and this is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And I'm going to invite you all to do this with me, and we can put it, we've got the slide here for you. What I'm going to invite you to do, I think most of you are off camera, is I'm going to invite you just to either close your eyes or find a space in front of you that you can just sort of focus your eyes on and sort of zone out for a second. You want to make sure that your body is in a comfortable position. For me, that is sitting up straight, feet flat on the floor. Doesn't necessarily mean that's for you, but whatever position you're in, you just want to make sure that there's no physical sensation that's going to be particularly bothersome to you in the moment. And so I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, and just with me, I want you just to take in one deep breath to the count of 4. We're going to hold to the count of 4, and then we're going to exhale to the count of 4. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to invite you we're going to use our senses. So I want you to just look around you and name internally, either internally, quietly to yourself, or you can name it aloud if you're in a space where you're free to do so. Just 5 things that you see in the environment around you. It can be any 5 things around you. It doesn't have to be anything particularly cool. 5 things you see around you. Now I want you to name 4 things that you feel, your physical sensations. Could be the feeling of your feet on the floor, the chair holding you up. You may have to reach out and touch something. 4 things that you can feel. Now I want you to name 3 things that you can hear in the environment around you. And now 2 things that you can smell. And if you don't smell 2 different things, maybe just think of your 2 favorite scents. And now 1 thing that you can taste. And if you can't taste anything, then just think of your favorite flavor. We're going to breathe in again to the count of 4. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. What we've done in just about 2 minutes by using this grounding technique is we pulled you out of all of the other stuff that was happening for you, focused your attention on the present moment using your 5 senses. And we've accessed your parasympathetic nervous system, which triggers the relaxation responses in you. So all of the intensity of other things that you were experiencing kind of comes down. You may notice that the quality of your experience in this moment might have changed in that. That's because we're triggering your brain to release the relaxation chemicals that slow down your heart, slow down your breathing, cause you to release tension. And you'll find that by doing this, oftentimes you're able to then come back into the moment that you were facing from a more wise-minded space. And it becomes easier to say, all right, if I'm doing what I value right now, what would I actually be doing? What I've been challenging folks to do is incorporate a grounding practice just throughout your day. So maybe start your day with some type of mindfulness practice. You can use something like the Calm app, or there's other apps, even just a breathing app if you have an Apple Watch or something else, to just help you to have a mindful moment. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening. And don't start with more than that. I know most of us are overachievers. And so, well, 5 minutes is great, then I'll do 20. Don't do that. Start with 5 minutes. If you're doing 5 minutes successfully for 2 weeks, then up it to 10 minutes. And then throughout the day, just sprinkle in mindfulness moments. So what I've encouraged folks to do is maybe you're about to type an email. When you go to reach out, put your hands on the keyboard, just stop. Use that physical sensation of hands on the keyboard for a second as a reminder of, let me just stop and take 3 quick, slow breaths. Focus all of my attention on my breathing, and then come back to what I'm doing. Sprinkle that in throughout the day. What research is telling us is that folks who are doing this are seeing, without the change in any of their stressors, they're seeing a dramatic reduction in the impact of stress on their lives. We're seeing an increase in their functioning. We're seeing a decrease in their error rates. We're seeing a decrease in stress-related health issues just by incorporating small practices of mindfulness throughout the day. Another thing that you can do for yourself, I want to offer you, and this is my last thought here before we take some questions. So I want to offer you to change how you think about the word recreation. If you break the word recreation down into its components, what we have is we have the prefix RE, which means to do again. And then we have the word creation. In other words, recreation are the things that you do to recreate yourself, to make yourself new again. When you step back and you allow yourself a moment of recreation, you are pulling up your drawbridge and you're saying, I need to invest in myself here. And it's what you do in those moments that make you new again, that restore you, that rejuvenate you, that give you the resources to offer your folks when you come back to your professional role. And so I want to challenge you, if you feel like this is not something that's a strength for you, to build in a practice of recreation, a moment of recreation into every day, several hours, if not a full day of recreation into every week, once a week, and a full weekend or a few days or whatever of recreation into every few months, if not even more. Try to build that in as a rhythm. Take back control of your drawbridge, because it's what you do with that allows you to show up with your full self in alignment with your values for your teams moving forward. So with that, I'm going to stop there. There's so much more I could have said, but I'm open to questions or comments or feedback.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robert. That has been so insightful. And I think for me personally, on the drawbridge analogy that you gave, you can apply that scenario to so many areas of your life. I think not only in the professional environment, but also in your personal, making yourself available to everyone all the time, no matter what setting, can be pretty daunting. And thank you. That was a very powerful analogy. So I'm going to look at the chat here, and I have a question. So do you find it helpful to encourage leaders about the impacts of secondary trauma so that they feel entitled to share their feelings? So talking to executives or folks that are not necessarily on the front line, how do you encourage them to acknowledge what they're feeling?
One of the tools that I have used with executives to encourage them to acknowledge how they're feeling is, it's difficult for executives, I think, to let down their armor and to say, I'm really experiencing something. So what I've done is often talk to them about the importance of modeling vulnerability, that they set the tone, they set the pace for the folks that we serve. I had an experience when I was huddling with a team. It was in the ICU, and I was talking about all the ways to recognize, the symptoms of traumatic stress in themselves and each other. And I had a gentleman say, "Yeah, Rob, okay, check. I got all that. What do you expect me to do about it? I've got patients to take care of." And I said, "Hold on here. You're telling me," because I had listed off trouble focusing, trouble sleeping, increased substance use, all these things. I said, "You're listing off all of these things. What if I were to tell you this morning on the way in, I was feeling some tightness in my chest, feeling a bit feverish, I was coughing. What would you tell me to do?" And he said, "I would tell you to go get a COVID test." What if I said to you, check, got all that stuff, but what do you want me to do? I've got work to do. I've got people to see. I've got meetings to hold. We've got resources. I got to do that. I've got to just show up and do my thing. He said, "No, that wouldn't be allowed." I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because you'd be a danger to yourself. You'd be a danger to your coworkers, and you'd be a danger to our patients if you had COVID. You need to take those symptoms seriously." And I said, "Okay, so you're telling me you're having difficulty concentrating, you're having emotional outbursts, you're increasing the substances that you're using, and we're not supposed to think that that's potentially a safety concern. We're not supposed to take that seriously. I'm not saying that you can't do your job, but we've got to take care of you." And so after that conversation, I went back to our leaders and I said, "Here's the deal. We've got such a pull yourself up by your bootstraps culture in healthcare. Keep going. We take a pride. Yeah, I power through." Yeah. And that attitude starts in the boardroom. And if we do that, if we model that behavior in the boardroom, you cannot tell me that that is not impacting the safety of our employees in those mindsets. It's not impacting the safety of our patients. It's not impacting our quality scores. It's not impacting our clinical outcomes. And so you've got to start modeling a mindset where it's okay to say, it's okay to not be okay. And it doesn't mean that you can't do your job. It doesn't mean that you're not talented. It means that you take the full range of your experience seriously, and we're able to model for our folks what our values are and what living into those really look like. Pain plus resistance is just suffering. Pain is not optional in life. We all have pain, and for us to pretend that we don't isn't some sign of strength, it's delusion. And when we resist that pain, we say, I don't want to experience that, I don't want to talk about that, all that we do is we increase our suffering. Pain plus resistance is suffering. Pain plus acceptance equals resilience and growth. And being able to lean in and say, no, I'm not okay right now. This is hard. Here's what I'm doing to lean into that, to turn towards that, and to model my values and to take care of myself. And I expect my team members to do the same. And so I talk to our executives a lot about being able to you know, you don't have to overshare, but acknowledge that it's there, and acknowledge that that you need to take steps to care for yourself in the same way that they do. And then also we've got to talk about what are the ways the institution is taking care of you. What are the processes? What are the structures? What are the policies that we have in place that are causing burnout? And to the degree that we have things within our power to control, we can't control the fact that the pandemic is happening, but what are the processes, the procedures, the resources we can leverage as an institution in order to address those structural challenges that are causing burnout? To the degree that we have the power to do that, we need to be talking about that and doing that.
Great. I like the way you put that. Pain plus resistance is suffering, and I couldn't agree more. Let's see. We have another question. How do you prompt the executives around you to do an internal check? If you notice they're suffering or there might be something going on, how do you prompt them to do a sort of an internal check?
I think it's helpful first to be able to raise an awareness of what the symptoms of stress look like and how it can show up in people in all the variety of ways. And so we started teaching psychological first aid and how to recognize those symptoms. And I have often handed the list of potential symptoms of stress and burnout and complex stress to folks. And then ask them, you know, they don't have to share with the room, but highlight for yourself where you notice which ones tend to show up for you. And then if you can have that and be able to do a check-in with yourself, schedule a 5-minute check-in with yourself here and there, but also have a trusted partner that you share this with, if you can, and say, you know, when I'm really starting to feel it, I'm starting to get underwater here, this is how it tends to show up for me. And have the ability to say, hey, you told me that stress shows up for you in these kinds of ways, and I'm seeing that in you right now. What do we need to do? That's where our Stronger Together Buddy program really became a powerful tool. Have somebody that you check in with every day, either by email, by phone, by text message, or in person, to say, how's your tank? How are you doing today? What's it showing up with? And being able to do that, the more we can talk about it, have that awareness, be able to recognize it, have a language to talk about it, the easier it is to do.
Absolutely. Great. So I think we have time for one more question. Is there any value in incentivizing self-care?
I think that's a double-edged sword. As an organization, I think before we incentivize self-care, let's make sure that we have had some honest conversations with ourselves about the policies, the things that we have in place that are causing burnout. I do think having programs, and we have them at Henry Ford, where, you know, we incentivize wellness, drinking enough water, taking walks throughout the day, all that kind of stuff. It encourages folks, and it, you know, can gamify self-care, especially, and as people get into competitions, it gives us a reason to be talking about it, to pay attention to it, and I think that can be helpful, but it's the ceiling effect on that is going to be, are we being self-reflective as an organization about the environment that we're creating? And not just are we creating that self-awareness, but are we being reflexive to that awareness and actually trying to do something about it? So we've got to do both.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. This has been so informative and very eye-opening. I couldn't help myself. I was getting drawn into your speech and I almost lost sight of the chat. So this was great. Rolando, I will turn it over to you to give our closing remarks. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert, for your insightfulness. I took so much personally, learning about shifting the mindset. To Isabel's point, that analogy about accessing the drawbridge and becoming public property, I have to do better at that. And this grounding technique, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I promise you, I'll probably be practicing that every single day. So thank you so much for what you have shared with us. There's more to come. I know if you missed the conversation, this will be recorded, and we will have this on our site in the next couple of days. But before we leave, we want to just remind you that our Leadership Summit will be happening in Denver, Colorado, September 22nd and 23rd. I know Deanna Caudillo, who's the chair of the summit, is on, and just really looks forward to inviting you. We have a safe capacity at the moment of 250 individuals in person. So we're very excited to welcome you to Denver, Colorado. The registration will go live by the end of this month, but we will also have a virtual offering for you. So if you're not able to make it in person, we welcome you to view our broadcast through our various online communication mediums. So be on the lookout. Again, if you want to know and learn more about NALHE, www.nalhe.org is our website, and we welcome you to navigate the various different tabs of resources that we have available. We thank our sponsors and our corporate partners that are on the line as well. And with that, I will, wow, we actually made it right at 4 o'clock. And this is part of practicing mindfulness, I think, too, as well, right, Robert? So thank you again, Robert, for that incredible and phenomenal presentation. So with that, we end the session, and be on the lookout for the next sessions of a series for this session as we continue exploring the mindful leader. Thank you all. Thank you, Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.